Another great win. Knight b5. He was tactically alert, and his technique was exquisite. Let's give Magnus some credit for the way he converted that.
Because Hikaru Nakamura is a tenacious defender, he put up some resistance there. But Magnus, he got that one. And now he's playing one of the cagey openings, the modern, the Pierce. He wants Queen A5 to come. But Hikaru Nakamura has been playing this since he was a child. This is a very dangerous line from Black's perspective.
I hope Magnus did his theoretical homework here, because this is, as you said, one of the most dangerous theoretical lines in chess. And if Hikaru knows it, you're going to be in trouble. I know there's a forced draw here. There's some sort of draw. Yes, that's it. And Hikaru's going for it. And he's forgotten about it, I think.
Yeah. This was from Lev Albert's Percolert, that book from way back in the day. I had that book. I played this opening from Black. And the point is bishop F2 check, king D2, bishop E3 is a forced draw if you take the queen on D8.
Now, White has the possibility of playing knight b5. Hikaru's not going to dip his toes into that toxic pool. He's going to accept the draw. A great result for Magnus.
But he's not going to accept it until he spends the rest of his time.
I've forgotten again.
Yes. So Hikaru's clock is 2 minutes and 30 seconds. He's going to take it down all the way to a couple seconds, and then he's going to play king D2 and king E1 back. Black has no choice. You've given up your queen. And so you have to play this forcing sequence of bishop E3 check and bishop F2 check.
And both players going to sit back. Magnus with a bit of a smirk on his face. But at this point, plenty of time. There will be 12 minutes left. That's at least 2 games, probably 3 more games. And if Magnus can keep putting the kind of pressure he's been able to do with the white pieces, Robert, he could get this lead down to 2 or maybe even 1 if he continues to play well.
Look at Magnus. I mean, he's probably just annoyed right now. But there's a lot of good news here for Magnus, right? When this is happening, you can compose yourself. Get ready to have the white pieces. He did just win a game, so he should be feeling better about his chances. And he actually did just smile for the first time in hours.
And maybe in days. He didn't seem to be in the best of spirits after his previous match. He expects perfection from himself. He can't be happy with the way he's playing, but he's definitely happy there's time left on the clock. Hikaru making one more move, and now he's going to wait again.
He's not waiting. He's thinking.
He's contemplating, choosing candidate moves. King D3 here is a tempting move that needs to be calculated, wouldn't you say?
Illegal moves, sorry, unfortunately, can't be done. So yes, this is a forced sequence. The bishop on the light squares cuts across the board. No king runs for you. And so this is a known forced draw. Unfortunately, it was forgotten by Hikaru heading into this game. So that makes Magnus's opening choice look pretty brilliant.
And that's another thing. You mentioned, what are you doing during this break other than crossing your arms and sipping water and smiling? You're thinking, if you're Magnus Carlsen, about what you want to do in the next game. You're reviewing your files in your head. And I know that sounds crazy, but these players have so much going on in their head. These extra 2 minutes, as you said, it allows Magnus to compose himself and make an informed choice about his opening in the next game, which, if I had to predict, I'd say he's likely to repeat that A3 shenanigans that we've seen him play thus far.
The same holds true for Hikaru, though, because he could spend this time thinking about how to play as Black. So that's exactly what he is thinking about, is the next game, the next opening, what he should do. And, well, this game is about to be a draw as soon as King E1 is played. And
don't lose on time.
There we go. Okay. We have the drawn game by repetition. 10-7, still a 3-point lead for Hikaru Nakamura. And Magnus keeps going back to the A3. If it wins you games, why not keep going?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And obviously, it's not an ambitious opening. It's not like White is aiming for a big opening advantage. You're aiming for a relatively fresh position where White has a tiny bit of pressure. And given the state in the match, this could get annoying for Hikaru. He knows that a loss in this game will get Magnus the closest he has been all segment long. And they've transposed, Robert, into a pretty well-known line of the Queen's Gambit accepted.
This is the World Championship match between Magnus and Fabiano from 2018. This opening was played a lot, and Hikaru and Magnus have played this stuff a lot. Yeah, it's really complicated here because the threat was e5 to e4 after attacking the bishop on f4. But now the knight on c6 is under attack. If you take on d5, this bishop takes h7 check, and then you get to win that knight on d5. So it's a really complicated sequence here, and Magnus is still laughing about something.
And has Hikaru walked into Magnus's preparation? Because Hikaru's the one taking a chunk of time here. He gets crazy after EFDC. There's the threat of b2, b4 in the end. And if Hikaru doesn't know this, Robert, this is major trouble. You could lose this in the blink of an eye.
Well, look at the time. Hikaru is spending time not because he has a forced draw, but he really doesn't know the position. And it's what you're saying. E takes f4, you get a bishop. D takes c6, you get a knight. White is up a pawn in that position, and b4 is a huge, huge threat. So it may look like black is going to go Pac-Man. E takes f4, take on e3. He goes knight d4, which apparently is a slight inaccuracy, but still a good move.
Boom shakalaka. That knight opens up the e-file, and white is up a pawn. It could be recaptured on the next move. Magnus still seems to be in his preparation, which is pretty ridiculous. But, oh, here comes the knight.
Knight e5 is bishop e6. But even if you trade the bishops there, Danya, it's clearly an advantage for white. And the reason why is that dark square bishop for black can't really attack anything, and white is kind of up a pawn. It's even material, 6 pawns per side, but we have a passed d4 pawn, and you have this pawn on f4 that's doubled and not going anywhere.
And Magnus starting to get into his groove. I like this move by Hikaru. He's going to take that knight and take on d1. But we always talk about this, Robert. Opposite colored bishop positions are a totally different kettle of fish when the queens are still on the board. When they're on the board, it favors the attacker. So Hikaru definitely has a serious defensive task cut out for him in the next couple of moves.
Yeah, and this king on g8 is not the safest piece on the board because e6 at some point will be a strike. Rook d7 is also a threat. And b5, speaking of strikes, huge move from Hikaru.
He's still my beating heart. Don't take on b5 because then the white king will not have a beating heart. But maybe the bishop can move to d5. Maybe the bishop itself can take. But then you've cut out the pressure on f7 and black can capture this very annoying pawn on e5. What a move by Hikaru.
And actually, after bishop b5 decree, rook b8, you got to be careful for that move because rook takes b5 is suddenly a threat, as is pawn to a6 because the bishop is pinned, the rook on d1 is loose, the queen on b3 is overloaded.
Great point, bishop b5, rook. I think Magnus should just go bishop d5 and then do not go rook d8 if you're Hikaru and walk into bishop takes f7. He's probably going to go rook c8.
But then e6. Then there's e6.
Oh, so then is he going to go rook b8?
I love how we did that process of elimination style. I feel like I'm back in like third grade, like doing a little math problem and not that one, not that one. Oh, okay. So rook b8 is the only move there. It's a very important move to find, and Hikaru will find it. But bishop d5 hits the rook. The rook has to slide over one square.
And if I may show something on the analysis board real fast, I promise. Bishop d5. If you go rook to e8, I don't think we discussed this, but there's still e6. You might say, well, what's the problem? I'll just take. And you can't take because the queen recaptures with check. And here, bishop slides into f7 with a fork. So literally, process of elimination yields only one square. And Magnus has to see that. Hikaru has to see that. Carlsen, not only is he no longer up on the clock, he's down 20 seconds and still thinking. And finally decides on bishop d5. Hikaru saw that instantly.
I wonder if he's thinking of bishop takes f7 check, queen takes f7, pawn to e6. It gets really sharp there because if the queen tries to blockade the pawn so there's no discover check, the rook flies into d7. There's a lot happening in this position, and it's not forced by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm guessing Magnus is considering options like that.
Great call. I definitely think he might play bishop f7. No, he makes a very Magnus move, but is he taking his foot off the gas pedal here?
Well, bishop c5 is a great choice. You actually would prefer your pawn to be on b6 if you're black to keep that bishop stable. But the f2 pawn is a target. Queen h4 at some moment can be annoying, or queen to e2, even more threatening.
It's unbelievable, but Magnus was up a full minute as they entered the middle game. Now he's down a minute, and he hasn't played e6 yet, and the tension is still building up. Can Magnus handle a position of this complexity with 20 seconds left?
So he goes rook c1, the bishop goes back to b6, queen takes b5, bishop f2 does not work. You lose your queen, but you get a checkmate. Wow. What a find by Magnus Carlsen. And queen takes e5 blunders as you're showing.
There's discover checks galore here. White's works, black's doesn't work, and that's because white has some luft and black does not. And maybe Hikaru should create some luft, but then you have to watch out for e6. It gets ridiculously complicated.
E6?
Wait, can you sack the queen? You could have.
I think he could have.
E6 was winning.
Wow.
He could have got a new queen and won the game.
But king f1, I can't blame him for that. King h8. What a cool move by Hikaru.
But I would argue that an on-4 Magnus, we might show this later, would have seen e6. Nonetheless, he's got a big advantage in the endgame. You like to point out the pawn majority. Black's pawn majority is fully crippled, and you might not have a pawn majority if white takes on f7 at the right moment.
Although if he took on f7, there would be bishop b2, so he goes rook c4 first. That way bishop b2 doesn't come with tempo. He can put a4, then b5. He has a clear extra pawn. Does Magnus on the queen side. Material is even, but the position is not.
And neither is the time. 11 seconds for Magnus. He's got to build some time up here. Can he win this? Basically blitzing out his moves, trying to maximize the activity of the rook. We're accustomed, Robert, to seeing Magnus win these types of games. Can he pull another vintage endgame victory off?
Look at this. King c4. His king is going up the board. The king is a weapon in the endgame. Rook a6, pawn a4 coming. First b5. Bishop c6 is possible. Oh my goodness. This looks very unpleasant.
Progress being made, but after the king parks itself on d6, you can never really go b6. Hikaru throws off a pawn to cripple white's pawn structure.
But the king just comes back. He wants the f2 pawn. He's not getting it.
He's not getting a single pawn, and here comes the a pawn. And here comes black's king.
Yeah, maybe. Oh, he trapped the bishop.
Trapping the bishop.
If that rook can get back around, the bishop is trapped. But look at this. The h6 pawn and the f6 pawn both target.
And the f6 pawn.
King g4, king h5.
King h5.
Oh my
G6.
goodness.
He's infiltrating. He's taking. He's pressuring. He
winning.
Still has time.
He's just moving his king around now.
Move the bishop back and sack on f6.
He wants b6, and if you go king c5, there's rook takes a7.
It's winning. He's knocking on the door of having this lead. Can he finish it off?
Whoa. He goes there because bishop b6 is king takes f6. It's winning.
What recognition? And
king
this
f6.
Is winning. King f6.
And just go back. You can take on
Where?
g5. I don't...
Move!
Oh, the h3 pawn is lost, but the bishop moves back, I guess, and then the king moves out the way, and the f pawn runs. But do not trade that last pawn.
No, because then it's a draw.
Wow!
King g7, what recognition?
Magnus is the king of that.
Rook h4 and rook f4. It's not over yet. Hikaru might
Look at this. Bishop g4.
Oh,
he is
this
so
is insane.
Precise.
And this was necessary because Hikaru would have otherwise given up the rook and traded the last pair of pawns.
And look at Magnus. You see the relief on his face? He gets this last game into 3+1. He can cut the lead down to 1 point heading into bullet. And Danya, that was insane precision. He found every single move that liquidated, that kept the advantage, and let him win the game.
This is the Magnus that we know. And I'm not implying that this is normal in some way. Or, yeah, well, of course we're seeing this. Magnus is the only person in the universe who can win an endgame like this with 5 seconds. And he has been winning endgames like this throughout the whole SCC, and they're repeating this again.
Yeah, Hikaru keeps going back to this line, which seems to be more or less a forced draw. I mean, Magnus has never been in any trouble. But look at the clock situation. 3 minutes and change for Hikaru. 3 minutes of change on the match clock. So if Hikaru does nothing, this will be the last game of the 3+1, and he will retain a 2-point lead.
And he went for this at the start of the 3-minute portion. I didn't like it. He goes for this now. I do like it because a 2-point lead is still significant for Hikaru going into the bullet. And clearly he's found an improvement during the break. A4 rather than what he was doing previously, which is to prepare C4. What do you make of this?
Well, I think at least gives us something new to talk about. But I don't think that there's much going on. Now, you have to be very careful if you're black because A takes B5. A takes b5, rook a6 is a huge threat because you're removing the defender of the knight on d5, and the geometry is such that you could lose all your pieces as black if the c6 pawn falls. So Magnus has to be careful, and Hikaru, he just switching a little something here.
And a professional approach by Magnus. He takes as long as it takes to find what was the only move to maintain the balance. I checked. And now you are just in time. AB, rook a6. The rook captures on b2, but more importantly, it forces the bishop off of this diagonal. Hikaru basically has to bail out with bishop takes d5 check. This game, I'm quite confident is going to end in a draw. Just look at Magnus's body language. He feels satisfied and confident. He seems as engaged as he's been all match. More engaged than he's been all match.
He really is. And if you're Hikaru here, don't take any unnecessary risk. I know you're probably displeased that you had a 4-point lead. Now it's down to 2. And you're playing Magnus Carlsen, who can beat anybody at any time, right? Once he turns on the jets, he may never look back. But if you're Hikaru, look what he's doing. He's just going to spend a lot of time. He's probably going to simplify, make the draw, and then go into bullet with the lead.
Both players have to take a breath. As experienced as they are, there's going to be a lot of jitters to go around in the bullet segment. He does take b5. How exactly do we bail out without losing a pawn here? Because rook takes b2, Robert. And after rook b3, don't go rook d3 and allow b4. Move your king or move your f pawn. And this is a draw.
Dead draw. Rook takes b5. We just have king, rook, and 2 against king, rook, and 2. There's 1 minute remaining in this time control.
Yeah.
But there's no way Hikaru is going to let another game be played in 3+1.
It would be absurd to not milk the rest of this clock down, given how Magnus has played with the white pieces, and avoid a repetition if you're Hikaru, or get a repetition going, do what he's done previously, which is to sit and then repeat for the third time once his clock is down.
Oh, I thought
that's what he's going to do.
I thought you were saying do what he did previously and win a rook again, like he did against Nihal Sarin.
We had almost this exact structure. He was on the black side of it, and Nihal got himself skewered. I will never forget that moment from that match.
Wow, we are going to have a 2-point lead for Hikaru Nakamura. Now, if before the match you said, Hikaru, you'll be up by 2 points going to Bully, he said, of course, give me that lead. But I feel like right now he has to feel a bit disappointed. It's hard to put losses out the window, especially when they're recent, because if we just look at the last bunch of games, it is Magnus Carlsen who's been on a bit of a winning streak. And they made a draw. It is the end of the 3+1. And that means we are heading to bullet chess.